In the depths of sprawling forests, shrouded by a perpetual veil of mist and mystery, dwell creatures that defy the bounds of reality. These creatures, born of whispered legends and chilling encounters, lurk in the shadows, their existence a haunting question mark on the map of the unknown. Let's prepare to delve into the spine-tingling world of Wisconsin's top 10 cryptids. Hello everyone, and welcome to Wicked Encounters, where we explore just what goes bump in the night. I'm your host, Allie, and today we're going to take a trip to the Midwest to explore the top 10 cryptids from Wisconsin. Let's get started, shall we? The cryptids coming in at number 10 are displaced kangaroos. No, that's not a typo in my script, nor is it a slip of the tongue for displacer kangaroos for D&D nerds. Write that down! Kangaroos have had a pretty interesting history in Wisconsin. In fact, sightings of them in the Badger State date as far back as 1899, where a woman in New Richmond reported seeing a kangaroo run through her neighbor's yard. Most people figured that the kangaroo was an escapee from the circus that had recently been in the town. But when contacted, the circus said that they didn't have any kangaroos in their acts. In April 1978 in Waukesha, a school bus driver named Patricia Wilcox called in to report that she had seen 2 kangaroos. Her direct quote to the Waukesha Freeman was, "I'm sane, sober, and I saw kangaroos. I thought they were deer at first. People were honking and slamming on their brakes. And finally, one guy hit one, but it just got up and hopped off." Within a week after Wilcox's sighting, another kangaroo was seen in the nearby town of Pewaukee, with 12 additional people reporting that they had seen a kangaroo within a month after Wilcox's initial report. A local tavern decided to organize a kangaroo hunt, but had no luck spotting the marsupials. Eventually, 2 brothers and a friend came forward saying that they had created the kangaroo as a prank, making the creature out of cut-out plywood with mud and toothpaste. But the witnesses weren't convinced, and neither am I. I mean, mud and toothpaste, that's really how you're going to make this thing come to life? I've never done a DIY kangaroo, but I'd like to think my first attempt would be better than that. But also, the Wisconsin Agriculture Department wasn't convinced either. They had actually issued a press release when it came to the kangaroos on April 27, 1978, urging Wisconsin residents to beware of kangaroos and to keep their pets away from them in fear of their animals catching diseases. On January 3, 2005, there was an article published of a kangaroo that was actually captured. A 150-pound red kangaroo that, when no one came forward claiming to own him, was given to the Madison's Henry Villas Zoo. Later that year in December, a man also hit one with his truck, where the poor thing had apparently been living in a culvert on the man's property. Now I know what you're thinking, but Allie, a kangaroo has no chance in the cold Wisconsin winter. They're used to the hellscape that is Australia. And you're right, Australia doesn't typically get snow. Maybe sometimes, but not often. And when it does, the kangaroos don't seem to be fans with how they shiver in the snow. You can find videos on them somewhere else if you really like to. Or maybe Coots will put one in, I don't know. Maybe I'll make it a little task for him to find a shivering kangaroo. But the fact remains, kangaroos live in Wisconsin. Even more so, they're doing pretty well with how many have been proven to have been seen and, well, hit by cars. Number 9 is the Mineral Point vampire. On the evening of March 14, 1981, in Mineral Point, the police responded to reports of a strange man skulking Graceland Cemetery. Mineral Point is an old Cornish mining settlement loaded with history and lore. It wasn't uncommon for oddballs to be exploring it, but still, the police sent Officer John Pepper to check it out. When Officer Pepper got to the cemetery, he saw a tall, pale, darkly dressed figure. When he approached the figure and asked what they were doing, they ran. Officer Pepper pursued, following the individual until they leapt over a 4-foot-tall fence at the edge of the cemetery into an adjacent cow pasture where Angus bulls were grazing completely undisturbed. Thus, the tale of the Mineral Point vampire began. For the next few days after Officer Pepper's report, sightings of a lurking vampiric figure kept popping up. Some people openly mocked the idea as they dressed up like vampires and went bar hopping. But years later, in March 2004, the police once more responded to reports of a strange individual. But this one wasn't in a cemetery. This one was in a tree outside an apartment complex where they were harassing the tenants. The police went to speak to the individual and they fled, only to be chased by the responding officers, though they lost track of their suspect rather quickly. It had been snowing previously, and snow was still covering the ground, allowing them to follow the tracks of their quarry, until said tracks led them to a concrete wall, where they came to a very abrupt end. On the night of July 11th, 2008, the most terrifying encounter with the creature came. Mineral Point residents Brandon Hines and his girlfriend Jamie Marker had been fishing off a jetty on Ludden Lake when they heard a noise coming up from under it. They described it as sounding like something was using the boards of the jetty like a ladder, climbing along underneath us. Hines started stomping on the boards to make a bunch of noise in hopes it was an animal that would be scared away. As the couple looked down between the boards with their flashlight, they heard water splashing further down. When they looked up, they saw a figure with dark hair and a very pale face pulling itself up onto the jetty. The couple stood unable to move in their shock, as the person rose to their feet. Dressed in what is best described as a Dracula-looking cape and suit, Hines threw his flashlight at the being and bolted for the car, whereas Marker was already inside the vehicle. The figure was heading their way, and quickly, as Marker screamed for Hines to start the car quickly. Fortunately, unlike in horror movies, the car started reliably, and the couple sped off to the Mineral Point Police Department to report what had happened to them. A patrol unit was sent out to where the two had been, but no one was there. Hines and Marker went back the next day to get their belongings and were able to find everything except for the tossed flashlight. When asked about his missing light, Hines said, "Whoever it is, they can keep it." Number 8 is the Rhinopelus. All across the country are statues dedicated to bizarre and amazing monsters specific to their area's location. And then there's the Rhinopelus. The Rhinopelus, or the green monster of Monaco, Wisconsin, is, well, unique. Said to be the rival or a close relative of the Hodag. I guess it depends on who you ask. Maybe both. It possesses 3 massive appendages that each end in a 3-clawed foot that the Rhinopelus is able to scuttle about in any direction like a massive spider. With a lizard-like head positioned low on its body and a massive horn that juts out over 2 feet from its neck, it would really be a terrifying creature to see charging at you with its red glowing eyes. If it was real. The green monster of Monaco was born in the 1940s when local Guy Daly spotted a massive, strangely shaped piece of wood. With 3 large prongs coming off of the log, Daly thought it looked like a rhino, an elephant, and an octopus. Thus the name Rhinopelus was created. Daly dragged the log back home and put it on display in front of the Lake Venus Tavern, where it remained for more than 60 years, eventually being painted yellow and then green to turn it into a real monster, and to preserve the wood. But in the early 2000s, the latest owner contacted a Monaco resident, Bob Walkowski, to say that if he didn't take the Rhinopelus, it was going to be cut up. Guy Daly was deceased by this point, so Walkowski contacted Monaco Town Chairman Robert Briggs about the statue, and the two worked together to get the statue moved using an excavator and a dump truck. They moved the statue to the Monaco Town Park and added a fence and shelter to keep the statue safe. They claimed the fence was added because the Rhinopelus preys on hodags, so this was how they tamed and protected it. Previously, it was open for the public to go up and touch when it was at the tavern, but behind a flimsy little chain fence works too, I guess. The Rhinopelus, in all honesty, was Monaco's little way of giving Rhinelander a nose-thumbing. After all, why should they have the only big, mean, and green monster in the state? The Steinthal monster is an obscure one, but comes in at number 7 on our list. In the town of Eaton, Wisconsin, was the unincorporated community of Steinthal. Long ago, the Schweitzer family lived on a farm, a decent-sized, if not humble dwelling that one night mysteriously caught on fire. In the aftermath, the barn was completely destroyed, along with one side of the family home. Rather than rebuild, the Schwartz moved, but not before putting up no trespassing signs all along the main entrance to the farm. As we can see from Centralia and other abandoned locations, signs do little to deter people who want to explore abandoned locations, and the Schwartz old farm was no exception. It became a spot for local youths to loiter about, as few others would wander so far out of their way. Most wouldn't approach the farm until nightfall, so it became the perfect location for sharing scary stories. Soon, those scary stories evolved with each retelling until they reached monstrous proportions. And from them, a monster was born. On one fall night of 1965, at exactly midnight, a creature had been spotted. No one remembers who it was who first claimed to have spotted it, but soon everyone was hoping to catch a glimpse. Suddenly, the regular pranks and dares turned into real monster hunts, with teenagers packing themselves into cars to get to the farm before huddling up with flashlights drawn, hoping to catch a glimpse. But what was it? Descriptions of the monster vary. First claims said it was a large, hairy creature over 7 feet tall with 2 gigantic green eyes that shined as bright as a flashlight. Another had it that the monster was over 9 feet tall, covered in thick hair and 1 giant green eye in the center of its hide, like a menacing woolly mammoth cyclops. The final version had the monster with thick dark hair, between 6 and 9 feet tall, and possessing not 1 nor 2, but 3 eyes. Ooh, super spooky, right? The Steinthal monster was typically spotted, just standing in the field or lumbering about as monsters do. Kinda just vibin'. Basically, the typical encounter was like this. A car full of wannabe monster hunters would arrive on the property. Depending on how brave or foolish they were, some would stay in the car, while others would step out and scan the fields. Sometimes an animal might be in the field. Their eye would catch the flashlight and shine a bright green, terrifying the spotter, who would then run back to the car in a panic with the others following. They'd jump in, and the car would quite literally speed off back to Kyle, talking about what they'd seen. If they were 18 or over, they'd go to the tavern, as at this time the U.S. drinking law was 18 and over until 1984. In the taverns, adults would hear the talk of a monster, go out for themselves to have a look, and find nothing. Then everything would start all over again the next night. Some parties would even get a spot in the newspaper discussing their monster hunt over and over again, until October 1st, 1966, when tragedy struck. John Carr, 17, his girlfriend Vicky K. Freese, 15, Vicky's brother Jeffrey Freese, 18, and his girlfriend Carol Marie Schneider, 15, had all gone on a double date to the movies, followed up by the traditional trip to Schweitzer Farm for some monster hunting. Reports have them staying there for around 15 to 20 minutes before they decided to head home. At the same time, Gerald Krupp, 26, was getting ready to leave the local tavern. He was believed to have had between 3 to 6 drinks during his hour-long stay at the tavern, but he didn't appear physically drunk, so no one stopped him as he climbed into his car after saying goodbye to his cousin. Both vehicles made their way to the junction of State Highway 32 and County X, a location that was very recently labeled a hazard by the county police department and was being looked into for possible restructuring by the State Highway Commission. All too little, too late. Carr had been driving the vehicle and came to a stop at the posted stop sign before continuing through. The car driven by Krupp did not, and hit the teens at roughly 60 miles per hour, flipping both cars over and over again before they came to a rest in the fields southwest of the intersection. John Carr, Vicky K. Freese, and Carol Marie Schneider all died at the scene. Jeffrey Freese was in critical condition but ultimately survived. Gerald Krupp, the cause of the accident, was reported as in stable condition. Not long after the crash, reports of the Steinthal monster came to a stop, minus the occasional whisper from a random youth here and there. But for the most part, the tragic accident became associated with the monster. In barely a year, the accident seemed to almost completely erase the monster, but a few would still talk and theorize about what it could have been, even if no one was actively looking for it. The best explanations came from local hunters and trackers from the area. One man, who was a tracker, said that the Schweitzer home was located not too far from some natural springs, small swamps, and they were usually filled with deer, who he believed started hanging out around the farm and fields when it became abandoned. As far as height goes, the tracker and a bow hunter both theorized that the deer might have been spotted while standing on their hind legs while trying to reach crabapple trees. For the eyes, you're still able to see deer eyes when they're on their hind legs, and depending on which way they turn, you can see one or both of their eyes, and if there are multiple deer, then there's multiple chances for multiple eyes. Others believe that the monster could have been an elusive black bear that had been spotted in the area before any talk of monster ever came up. The final theory? Could have been Bigfoot. Located in Mauston lies a decades-old legend of a giant bird-like monster that lurks in the shadows waiting for the unsuspecting to terrify. The Mauston Birdman apparently enjoys messing with children the most, with almost all of its sightings being reported by children. In the Book of Bizarre Beasts, a person wanting to go by Spooky Robinson gave a pretty good description of the being and their grandmother's encounter. They said, "In 1980, I was 10 years old. We lived in the country on the side of a bluff 5 miles west of Mauston on Highway 82. It was a very isolated place, with lots of trees surrounding the house. My grandparents lived in a trailer right next to our house. One day, my grandma started screaming. We went to see what was going on. She was hysterical, screaming about a birdman looking at her through the window. She got up to see that there was this tall birdman looking at her. It was 6 feet tall, covered with yellowish feathers with a very long beak. It had the body of a man, complete with arms and legs, very human looking. Its feathers were yellowish, big, and round, not long and skinny like on most birds. They covered its body. The feet were just like bird feet, except they were really big and thick with claws on the toes. Its head was a huge bird head covered with feathers, like on the body, with a long yellow beak. The head came right out of its shoulders." Spooky Robinson said that a few years before his grandma's encounter, his sister told them that Big Bird had come to see them one night. He took them outside and showed them all kinds of neat things and played with them. She talked about it for a year and then just never brought it up again. Personally, I'm terrified at the idea that the Birdman might not have been a cryptid or a monster. That idea when it comes to children? I'll stick to believing in Birdman for the kids' sake and avoid a more sinister possibility, thanks. We're at the halfway point now at number 5, the Eau Claire Beast. On March 19, 1908, the Wisconsin newspaper, the La Crosse Tribune, published a short article with the headline, "Beast Causes Terror." In its contents was the story of a wild beast, described as a panther, that was terrorizing the residents of Eau Claire by attacking and eating their livestock. It had also been spotted stalking a child of one of the local farmers. That was all the newspaper ever mentioned. But that wasn't all that the residents of Eau Claire would end up dealing with. Sightings of the beast continued on with regularity, leaving the populace of Eau Claire always weary of the potential danger that stalked them outside of their home. It became a legend, but only known to those in the area for the next 93 years. In 2001, a woman who had just finished her night shift at the local hospital was driving back home on Highway 37 when something caught her eye. It was big and dark, and it appeared to be crouching low to the ground. The woman had never seen something like it before and slowed down to get a better look through the darkness of night, thinking that maybe it was a very big dog. Suddenly, she looked into the creature's eyes where she realized that it wasn't a dog, but something she could only describe as being a very large panther. The beast rose up on all fours, rising to the size of a bear despite its very feline shape. Fearing that it was going to attack her car, the woman quickly sped off to her home. In 2002, another woman, an evening news producer, had been taking Highway 37 home after the end of her 11 p.m. shift. She noticed a large shape off to the side of the road and slowed down to see what it could be. As her headlights illuminated the beast's massive eyes, it rose up and fled into the countryside. She too noticed that the thing was as large as a bear, but was very clearly the shape of an entirely black cat. Since then, sightings of the beast of Eau Claire haven't really been reported. State wildlife officials claim that there are no large cats in the state of Wisconsin, but they say that about Pennsylvania too, and there 100% is. There have been over 2,400 reported sightings of large cats in Wisconsin since 2008. Whether they're bear-sized, well, no, since that was last reported 22 years ago, but there's always the possibility that the beast of Eau Claire might actually be real. The most important underwater being to the Ojibwa is Mishipeshu, the great lynx, and it comes in at number 4. It resembles a dragon-like feline with horns and its back and tail covered in scales made of pure copper, residing in the depths of large lakes such as the Great Lakes. Mishipeshu is the cause of waves, rapids, and whirlpools, and is the reason for ice breaks in the winter months, causing many to drown. The size of the Mishipeshu varies from community to community, ranging in size from a common lynx to a being larger than a house. Their roar or hiss was capable of bringing in storms or rushing rapids. Kind of like in action movies where you hear that sound when someone asks, "Hey, what was that?" And then everyone slowly turns around and you see an oncoming flood. It's kind of like that, which is pretty fitting because Mishipeshu were often the cause of drownings, but they were also the source for good fishing and would often be called upon by fishermen. On top of being basically gods of water, Mishipeshu was also known for its copper. It was said that the creature would guard vast amounts of copper in Lake Superior. Before Europeans even settled the area, indigenous people would mine the copper found all around the lake. But by the 17th century, it was viewed as extremely taboo by the Ojibwe tribe, especially any copper found on Mishipeshu Island, as this was where it was believed Mishipeshu lived, and to take copper was viewed as stealing from the Mishipeshu itself. The story of Mishipeshu, its island, and copper involves 4 Ojibwa who journeyed to Mishipeshu Island to take some copper back to their home and use it to heat water. The very second they pushed off and backed into the water with their canoe, the eerie voice of the water panther surrounded them. The water panther came growling after them, vigorously accusing them of stealing the playthings of his children, in reference to the copper. All 4 of the Native Americans died on the way back to their village, the last one surviving just long enough to tell the tale of what had happened in his final moments before he died. Basically, it was a cat being a cat. Don't take kitty's possessions. Number 3 on the list is the Wisconsin manbat. On September 26, 2006, at around 9 p.m., a report came in of a 6-foot-tall manbat thing with a 10 to 12-foot wingspan. The witness, a Native American man named Wohali, lived in La Crosse and said that while he and his son were driving home on Briggs Road in the village of Holman, a massive dark creature flew up to their windshield, screamed at them, "Justice," and then flew upward into the sky, just as Wohali's son swerved the vehicle to the side of the road. While they didn't have a chance to look at the creature for long, they noted that it had leathery bat-like wings, human legs with claws, distended ribs, and very sharp teeth. Right after the sighting, both Wohali and his son became violently ill, with a sickness that lasted an entire week. While it might be easy to write off a single sighting, there have been other creatures sightings in that area beforehand in 1997. A worker for the state DNR, along with road crew, saw a flying humanoid similar to what Wohali said the manbat looked like, though this one was said to be more lizard-like. The creature watched them from the side of Highway 13 before taking off into the sky and disappearing out of view. Around the same time, a father and son were looking for their lost dog along the Black River near La Crosse. While doing so, they came across what appeared to be a lizard man that terrified them to the point they remained frozen in their spots. The creature stared into their eyes for an uncomfortably long amount of time with unbroken eye contact, watching as they slowly backed up to a safe distance. Since then, none of the other creatures have been seen. But, that's fine. Mothman hasn't been spotted much recently either. Maybe he's vacationing in Wisconsin. Oh, Rhinelander's gonna kill me for this one. The second top cryptid is the Hodag. I know, highly controversial to not give the big mean green the number one spot, but I have my reasons that I'll give, I promise. During the Wisconsin timber boom of the late 1800s, Eugene Shepard of Rhinelander was a land developer, lumberman, surveyor, and prankster. And the Hodag was his magnum opus. Eugene described the Hodag as a hideous creature with horns like a stag beetle, stegosaurus spine plates along its back, short, sharp teeth, a spiked tail, and just... If you've seen pictures of what Eugene had it looking like, it basically looked like bad roadkill. Eugene said that the Hodag was scared of lemons and ate white bulldogs. The scarcity of Hodags? Well, that was because of the scarcity of white bulldogs. Makes sense, right? Others, upon hearing of the Hodag, gave it a more noble origin story. For those who truly believe in the Hodag, it is said that they are the reincarnated spirit of a hard-working oxen that helped lumberjacks drag logs through the forest to their destination. Either way, in 1893, Eugene had gathered up a bunch of men and said that through the use of hunting dogs, rifles, dynamite, and squirt guns loaded with poison water, they didn't capture the beast, they killed it. But that didn't deter Eugene, who in 1896 claimed he caught a real, living, breathing Hodag using dynamite and chloroform. He displayed the beast at the Oneida County Fair for 10 cents for any wannabe looky-loos to see. Of course, this entrance fee allowed someone to peek at the mythical Hodag way on the other side of a large tent as it growled and shaked. Most visitors would run out seeing the creature jerk about and share with others what they had seen. This amazing discovery of a previously unidentified creature made its way to the ears of a few scientists from the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., who decided they'd make the journey to Rhinelander to see the Hodag for themselves. It was at this point that Eugene fessed up to being a fraud. His captured Hodag was really a puppet created of wood, leather, and various animal parts that he put together to fool the public and the press. It worked, but Rhinelander wasn't angry at Eugene for his actions. You see, a mere 14 years after Rhinelander was founded, it had begun to crumble economically. It was started as a lumber-based city, and they were very quickly running out of the pine forest that the city had popped up from. Already more than half of the sawmills had closed, and others needed to keep expanding their operations further and further away. With attention from the Hodag going national, though, it helped give Rhinelander the boost it needed to go from lumber to agricultural development so that it was able to keep going. To this day, Rhinelander loves its big green cryptid, giving it its own festival, statue, and various locations are named after the beast or have a product associated with him. And honestly, I think that's just amazing. But why was it given my second spot instead of my first? Well, the Hodag is a proven hoax. Unlike other hoaxes, though, this one brought a community together and helped Rhinelander establish itself after lumber just wasn't a feasible solution to keep the city going. You gotta admit that for a prankster, Eugene did good with this one, and I'm sure he'll be in the history books for a while longer when it comes to the history of Rhinelander. This is it, the cryptid that is number 1 on my list of Wisconsin's top 10 cryptids. Do you have any guesses before the big reveal? Get your comment in now. The number 1 cryptid on my list of Wisconsin's top 10 cryptids is the Beast of Bray Road. The oldest reported sighting of the Beast of Bray Road comes from 1936 from Mark Shackleman, who was a night watchman for the St. Coletta School for Exceptional Children on the outskirts of Jefferson, Wisconsin. The school was located in a former Franciscan convent and covered several old buildings, an orchard, and a wide open field where several old Native American burial mounds had been preserved. I said it before and I'll say it again. Always a very bad idea to build on known Native American burial grounds. One night, as Shackleman was crossing the field, he saw what looked like someone digging at one of the mounds. He thought that it was perhaps a dog or a wolf, until it stood up at a decent 6+ feet tall. A thick, muscular creature covered in fur with a canine face growled down at Shackleman, whose heart was beating uncontrollably as he stared at the beast with a shaky breath. Suddenly, the beast turned and ran off into the trees, disappearing in the foliage under the cover of night. Sightings became more prevalent in the 80s and 90s, with many of the people who had spotted the beast having been in their cars. Many people often spotted it crossing the road or eating roadkill off the side. For those who had seen it that were outside of their vehicle, well, one woman claimed that the beast tried to break into her home, but fortunately was unsuccessful. Despite its inability to get in, it did leave its mark on her horse, where the poor animal had a large gash going across its back, and a few massive paw-shaped footprints, which she claimed were over 12 inches long. Most stories of the beast began being shared after a high school girl had an encounter with it while she was driving down Bray Road near Delavan on Halloween night, when her right tire hit something and was lifted off of the ground. As anyone should, she got out, checked to see what she might have hit, and that's when she saw the massive wolf-like creature standing on 2 legs, just off the side of the road, staring at her, until it suddenly decided to charge. She quickly rushed into her car and sped away, but not fast enough to avoid the creature jumping onto the trunk of her car. It didn't do any serious damage, but it did leave a few claw marks on her trunk. The girl went to the Walworth Animal County Control to tell her story, and soon many others began recounting their own encounters with the creature. And this all eventually caught the attention of Linda Godfrey, who at the time was a reporter for The Week, a Walworth County weekly paper, who was sent to investigate the strange stories of a canine monster. She took a trip to the Walworth County Animal Control, where she spoke with Humane Officer John Fredrickson, who gave her a manila folder he had marked werewolf. It was filled with note cards detailing 6 or 7 sightings of the creature, though Fredrickson himself believed they were most likely mistaking coyotes or a wolf for a horrifying creature. He stated as saying that, sometimes when a wolf or coyote is ready to pounce on an animal, it'll actually spring up, which gives the illusion that it's standing. So if they caught sight of the animal at just the right moment that it was lunging, it could have appeared to have been on 2 legs. To have so many sightings that you get your own folder is a rather impressive feat, in my opinion. With credible witnesses and officers checking in, and being my all-time favorite type of cryptid out there, the Beast of Bray Road takes the number 1 spot for me. But what about you? What's your number 1 Wisconsin cryptid? Are you like me and you're giving it to the Beast of Bray Road, or are you a Hodag fanatic and feel the poor green monster lost unfairly? What other states do you want to see a list for? Let me know in the comments. I read them all for future video ideas and to see how many other people enjoy learning about spooky stuff like myself. If you want to see what I release in the future, consider subscribing, liking this video, clicking the bell, and sharing it with others. If you'd like to support me in other ways, maybe consider checking out my Patreon. Speaking of, I'd like to give a big thank you to my patrons, especially my VIP campers. Well, with that, I'm Allie, this is Wicked Encounters, and I'll see you next time. Bye!